right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Culture Chat. We are joined today by Kevin Cole, CEO of Mid-Oregon Credit Union. Thanks so much for joining us, Kevin. It's a pleasure to have you and have your expertise and wisdom to share with our audience.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's always fun to catch up and see what's happening in the world.
Yes. So I was particularly interested in having you join us because you are so intentional about the culture that you've created at Mid Oregon for all the values that you bring and how that permeates is the word that comes to mind, but that doesn't sound quite right. But how really all the folks of your, what are you up to, 225 employees now?
168 that
Oh,
we
all right.
are
Yeah,
sitting on
active
now.
right
Yeah,
now. Awesome.
lots
And
of new
everybody
people.
really does embody the culture. So it's quite impressive to be a part of. But wanted to talk with you a little bit on how that's come to fruition and your leadership approach and again the intentionality that you bring to it. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
the word. Good use of the word, Rachel. We use that word intentional about the culture and how we want it to be a Mid Oregon Credit Union. And it really starts from the very beginning. I meet with each of our new employees during their first week, and we go through, the origin of our clarity questions and our behaviors, and we even talk about, all sorts of things from how to give and receive feedback, so that they're not taken aback as a new employee when someone comes up and says, "Hey, can I give you some feedback about XYZ?" And it really, I try to set the tone at that point during my initial conversation with them, but it gets reinforced in every staff and department meeting. It really starts with our clarity questions, which is a process that the Table Group, Pat Lencioni's organization, brought to Mid Oregon back in 2008, and so we're into this for 16 years now that we've been doing this. And the clarity questions are: why do we exist? How do we behave? What do we do? How will we succeed? What's most important right now? And so we reinforce that with our staff members, and it translates into the key objectives of the organizations. And I tell our employees, one of my sort of phrases that I always repeat very intentionally is that everyone's job is to achieve the key objectives. We have different roles in the organization, but I don't want there to be any lack of clarity on what it is we want them to accomplish.
Yeah. Beautiful. I mean, clarity is huge. Go ahead, Andy.
No, I think we were going to the same place. I think where most organizations get challenged and maybe fall short is there's a group of people that understands and knows maybe the mission, the vision, and the values, but putting it into practice operationally, making that be how you work day in and day out, making sure people are clear on what their role is in executing to that mission and vision, I think is where most organizations fall short. So it's
Yeah,
so refreshing. It is so refreshing to hear a CEO like talk about it so intentionally.
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Well,
one
and
that meets
values
with the
are
new hires, every new hire. I mean, that's huge. That's amazing. It's like I don't have enough time for that. Don't have enough time. I can't be
Yeah,
bothered with
you'd be
that.
amazed
But
at the number of people who tell me, like, "Oh, I worked at somewhere for like 2 years and I never met the CEO or the top leaders of the organization." And I just kind of makes me wonder what those people are doing that they can't find 30 minutes to, spend with their employees and talk about these really
yeah,
important things. You mentioned values, which is a really interesting conversation in the Oregon context. So we describe them as behaviors. Values are more of an individual thing, and we believe that um, your values are reflected in the behaviors that you encourage and those that you don't tolerate. And so
that's
when
right.
we talk about our most successful employees at Mid Oregon, demonstrate behaviors that are humble, hungry, and smart. And we talk really a lot about that. So we don't have, in fact, big art discussion with my predecessor. We had these value statements in our strategic plan, and they,
they were one of those things. It was like a page that said, it said everything, and so it said nothing. And none of the employees really even knew that it existed. It didn't impact how they approached their job. And so I finally won the argument, and we just stripped that page out completely and said, well, values are great, but we need things that are actionable for
That's
employees.
right.
We need to be able
Yeah.
to tell them, when you behave like this, it demonstrates humility. And we found that that has been far more successful, and it sort of removed this. There was this dissonance between, when we say all of these things, and you can't have everything be in your values, and otherwise you're going to end up with conflicts on, between two of the values. And it removed that dissonance when we just kind of took that out of the strategic plan and kind of out of the vernacular that we use at Mid Oregon.
I
love
like
that.
it. I was just
Go
going to
ahead,
say, I like how we recognize that they're personal values, right? Every individual has their own values, and really what we're rallying around is a shared common behaviors, right? This is what we want to see: the hungry, humble, and smart. This is what we can all rally around. How you get there, why it's important to you. That's you being an individual, and we want individuality there too. So.
But I think the actionable piece is really the critical part, right? Because as you've mentioned, I think many of us have either worked for organizations. I know certainly I've consulted in organizations where it's like, to your point, here's our booklet, here's our kit that has all of this stuff. And as you start to go layers and layers down, you're like, well, what does humble mean to you? How does humble work in your everyday life when you're here in the office, right? And people are sort of like, duh, like, they don't have these answers. So I just love the idea. First of all, it is all behavior, right? Most of what we're doing is all about behaviors, but it also is, I love that, when you act like this is how that shows up to the organization. When you behave like this is how that shows up, whether it's on the positive or negative side.
Yeah. And a lot of it is, our work with Rachel is really around this notion of cultivating leaders in the organization. And we make a really focused effort to develop our own talent internally. Number one, because we're the only financial institution headquartered within 100 miles in any direction. So for some of our positions that are kind of specialized to financial institutions, if we're going to recruit somebody, we have to move them to Central Oregon, and we found it to be much more effective if we just grow our own leaders. And it's amazing because they already know the culture and they know what's expected. And so when they transition into a leadership role, we don't have to worry about somebody coming in from the outside who doesn't understand our culture, who doesn't know how we do things. And that's been I think one of the keys to our success. In fact, I just had a little bit of a gut punch in the last week or so. We learned that one of our leaders is leaving Mid Oregon, and it's been so long since that happened. The last time with the exception of our mortgage department, which has had a series of challenges, but it's the first time we've lost a leader in the organization since 2019.
Wow.
And so we almost didn't know what to do. We were kind of like, well, what do we do?
Yeah.
Everybody had kind of forgotten what we do in that scenario.
Yeah.
And we lose employees not to other employers, but we lose them to other states. And that was the case in this one where, the husband's
Family
business
change.
was more in Idaho, and we were we're going to miss her, but it was surprising to me when I really sat down and thought about it. It's like, wow, this doesn't happen very often. Not really
That's,
sure, what do we need to do?
yeah. I mean, wow, what a huge sign, right? People don't leave. You don't need another statistic than that. Since 2019, you haven't had somebody leave. That's on the leadership team. I mean, that's pretty commendable and shows how all this intentionality and commitment to to growing folks pays off. You know, it's one of the things we struggle with, where people who don't really embrace, embody, and go, why would I do that? You know, it's not a big deal. And we're always like, well, tie it back to your retention, tie it back to your turnover, all that stuff. But you know, it just doesn't click for some folks, and because every company measures their success differently, it's probably the number one thing I think that coaches and folks in the OD and IO field really struggle with. Like, how do you measure the return on investment in this? And we're always saying, well, it's however you measure success and what that productivity looks like. And of course, like, retention is an indicator, but you can't make a one-to-one correlation. And yet, I still think 2019, haven't lost somebody, that is an indicator. That has to be a solid metric that you can tout.
Yeah, I tell people, just, other CEOs and leaders ask, like, oh, what are you guys doing at Mid-Oregon Credit Union? You're performing really well. And I tell them frequently that we are the case study for, like, the case that happy, engaged employees produce better business results. And I continue to have, new employees or people that have been with us for like a year. They come back and they say, like, oh my gosh, I've never worked somewhere where there's such an investment in me as a person. And what we're hearing from our younger employees is that is their value proposition for Mid-Oregon as an employer. What can you teach me? How can you help me advance my career, whether it's here or somewhere else? And if I'm going to spend my time here, you're going to teach me something and help make me a more valuable resource.
Contributor, yeah, contributor in society.
And so, and it looks like a variety of things. And so, when we have somebody that has demonstrated the commitment and the performance to where, we're going to prepare them for a leadership role, there's a whole process that we go through. We, identify the gaps in their knowledge and skills, and then we've developed, both internally and external resources, this toolkit of like 10 or 12 different things that we can plug in to help people learn different skills. So some of it looks like executive coaching. Some of it, we send these folks to this program called Leadership Boot Camp, and it's this like really intense self-examination and of their own leadership practices. We'll have people shadow different jobs. There's a credit union management school we send people to. There's just all of these different tools, and it's it's very individualized. We look at the person, and we have 3 of our executives are sort of in that window where they're going to retire in the next 1 to 4 years, and we have a pretty good indicator, pretty good idea of the candidates to fill those positions when it happens.
Succession planning.
Yeah, a company not afraid of succession planning. The
Funk
people
it.
retiring not afraid to talk about succession planning. We're laughing, Kevin, because a couple weeks ago.
How little attention people will pay to that, or like, and how they're afraid to even have the conversation about it.
Afraid to have the conversation.
It's the most
People
bizarre
think
thing.
that if they announce that they're going to leave, then they're going to be like ushered out or powerless or whatever. And we take the total opposite approach. We're like, oh my gosh, we have to extract all of your knowledge before you leave. Some of our folks have been around for 20 plus years, and so they know everything, or all the things are hidden, and all the little tricks and things that not everybody knows at Mid-Oregon. And so you have to capture that knowledge in order to have the continuity that leads to the high level of success.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question, because you spoke a minute ago about just the statistics on productivity and employee engagement. And as a CEO, I'm assuming you have other colleagues and, maybe networking groups. This doesn't seem like a concept that your contemporaries get entirely, right? Where do you think the missing link is for folks? Why they do? Because the data's there, right? We can easily correlate where you see profitability and employee engagement, but still it feels more like they're
Nice to have.
programs that we're just doing so that we can say we're doing stuff, but not like to the extent of really developing it as a culture. What do you think the gap is?
Yeah, so the gap is whether you have the humility to take it as feedback from your staff, or if you're just measuring as a statistic to put it in your, your annual performance metrics or your CEO evaluation by the board. That's where I think the disconnect is. A lot of people measure this information, but they don't necessarily do a lot with it. So the example that we're currently working through is we scored really high in engagement, and we had a 96 employee net promoter score, which is just, I think there just could have been one or
Amazing.
two people that
I
wouldn't recommend
mean,
their
that's
friend or
really
family
good.
to work for us. But the one consistent theme in that was the comment around meetings and the meetings making a valuable use of people's time. And so we took that feedback, and our plan is to, we'll survey employees, we'll do some focus groups to try to figure out which meetings and what the problems are. But you got to take action on it, and that's where I think so many people. In fact, the research that I've read is it's worse to ask your employees what they think about things and then not take action on
Oh,
it than to not even ask them at all.
Yeah,
that's right.
exactly.
It's better to not ask
Exactly.
them. It's better
If you
to
have no
not ask
intention
them
of doing it, don't ask.
than get them
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I,
excited
yeah,
that some
We
change
took,
is going to happen and nothing happens. Yeah.
and don't,
yeah, but like we do this thing in our organization called the thematic goal. That's the answer to question number 5. What's most important right now? And so, and we will set these thematic goals, and they run anywhere from 9 to 18 months, depending on the complexity of it. And so we spent an entire, like 15-month thematic goal working on the employee experience at Mid Oregon, and it ended up with probably 20 different initiatives that we tackled, and it was based on feedback and focus groups, and we got the employees together and just said like, hey, tell us about your benefits, how's that working out for you, and then we got some really actionable stuff out of it, and it was something that ended up being really positive for the employees as they saw that process from the survey to the focus group to actual policy changes or changes in their benefits that um, made their experience better at Mid Oregon, and it proved to be a real accelerator for us, kind of in that journey from being, we started with the goal to be a top workplace, right? To be able to recruit, to have more candidates, and this was during COVID when we really started diving into this. So there wasn't exactly a line of people wanting to work at Mid Oregon, and so our VP of HR, Carrie, and I were discussing like, well, what does success look like in this scenario, in this environment? And it was to be a magnet for talent, to have more good candidates than we had positions open, and to be a top workplace. And so the top workplace is sort of like, I call it the scoreboard, right? The real action is happening on the field, and if you do all that right, the scoreboard looks good at the end of the day. But we really had a great, like for our leadership team, it was such a cool thing to have as our thematic goal, because everybody took on different parts of it. It didn't all fall in the HR department, and it really touched a wide swath of things that impact employees. And so I think that focus was really kind of the accelerator, and it was right also about the time that our business results really started accelerating.
Whoa.
And
Shocking that those
yeah,
things.
and so but I think back to your question, I think the answer really lies in humility, because even in conversations with my the CEOs of other credit unions and other organizations, they say, well, what are you guys doing to have such high performance? And my offer is always, come over, spend a half a day with us, sit in one of our executive team meetings, and then we'll have lunch, and I'll talk about what we're doing. It's not a mystery. It's not, I mean, it's not easy, but it's not it's not rocket science either.
Yeah, it takes commitment and intentionality,
Yeah,
and
and
yeah,
so far,
and the humility. I mean, I really just
yeah,
want to stress that, like, we don't know everything. We don't
so
have to
far
know
we have
everything. It's
had one credit union. They were looking at a specific strategy that we used, and they came over and they spent the whole day with us, and we dedicated a lot of time to them to show them how we execute this member acquisition and growth strategy throughout all parts of the credit union,
yeah.
and they were blown away. It's really about selling checking accounts, and we took them into one of our branches, and our randomly selected employee did their sales presentation to the CEO, and he was blown away at how, like, what the whole process looked like, and what an amazing job she did, and they ended up signing on to go with the program, and I haven't followed
Oh
up to
wow.
see how they're doing,
Yeah.
but yes, most of them don't take us up on that offer, and they think it's some kind of magic, or a lot of them attribute it to the growth in Central Oregon. The
Oh.
community's growing at a faster
Mhm.
rate.
Mhm.
But what we see is, and that while that is true, we are also taking market share from other financial institutions and
Yeah.
adding new members, and the things that
Yeah.
we hear most of all are, number one, like, Mid Oregon employees just seem to be a pretty, like, friendly and gregarious group. So a lot of it comes from, oh, I ran into this person at this thing, the High Desert Museum, or I'm on this board with this person, or I see Mid Oregon everywhere, and decided that I needed to come in and join. Um, and sadly, it's also some of the really simple things. Like when you call Mid Oregon, someone answers the phone in a reasonable amount of time, which would call a lot of financial institutions. That's not the case. And
Automation.
that was one of our, actually, that was our first thematic goal, because during COVID, and our, of course, call center got kind of messed up, and the volume surged unexpectedly, and members were used to someone answering the phone, and so when we weren't delivering that, I was hearing from a lot of members, it's like, I don't want
This
to
is
call you
important.
anymore, and
Yeah.
ours wasn't as bad as some places. I mean, in our worst day, you would get a call back like within an hour.
Oh.
But
Yeah.
what we learned, and we were very intentional about this, we correlated our hold times to our net promoter scores, from those same people that were calling, and we learned that people are totally fine between 2 and 5 minutes. You don't
Yeah.
really gain a lot if you go less than two, and you don't really, you
Nobody's getting
really
super mad over 5 or less than
you
5.
go over five,
Yeah.
and you really start losing people, and so
Mm-hmm.
our call center team, those are their key metrics, and they know that they need to keep it in that 2 to 5 window, and every week, they report on their results, and it's been a completely, different situation. It's something that's gone from a source of complaints now to a source of, new
Right.
members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, just sorry, Rach. Two things. One, really quickly, a 96 net promoter score rating is so insanely high. And I think what's most impressive is it wasn't like, woohoo, pat ourselves on the back, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing because we got a 96. It was, shoot, we missed 4 points here. How do we gain those 4 points? And I think that probably says all you need to say about you, particularly as a leader, your entire leadership team, and your organization as a whole. So that's point number one.
Yeah, we were
Point
95 the year before, so we went up a point.
one point going up 1 point when you're that high is very difficult. It's very,
Yes.
very challenging. So the second point I think that I would make is how strange to take this amazing swath of data and use it to try and improve, the actions. It's like so many organizations, the data is there. The employees are telling you what they want and what they need and how things can be better. They're telling you. And most organizations are like,
It's too
like
hard.
not
Costs too
listening.
much.
Whatever the thing,
Yeah.
just it's uncomfortable to make the change, whatever the thing is. So it's very, very impressive, the work that you're doing there. Very, very impressive. Like I feel
It
like
is very
needs
impressive.
I feel like it needs to be like promoted Like, you
Well,
know,
we're gonna write a white paper. It sounds
yeah, like there needs to be
Kevin said he's
something
yeah,
where it's
yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is it's about people, the numbers are working, the organization's working better. It's all the things that you're talking about when wanting to run a successful business.
Yeah, like the
So I
hardcore bank and finance people, they look at this metric in banking called the efficiency ratio. It's basically how much in operating expense it costs you to generate $1 of revenue.
yeah,
And our number is like crazy low. I mean, like the big five banks would be happy at Mid Oregon's level efficiency ratio, and most credit unions are, they're quite a bit higher. And what's funny is um, the only way that, like we look at it because it comes up in our, dashboards and things that we create that come from third party sources. But the way that I explain it to employees is in that first meeting, I said, you're in Oregon is a great place to be. But if you don't like to work, this isn't going to be a good fit for you. And our employees are among the most efficient they will find in the financial services industry. And it's not because we work harder, it's because we work smarter.
yeah,
And
they're
we
not
work
stressed.
and all
They don't
this,
They
hate
can
their
be
jobs.
creative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And no
so-
fear, right? There's not a fear too of trying something different. You know, that's the all of those, hungry, humble, and smart. Hungry to try something different, to gain, humble and knowing that there might be a better way to do it, and exactly to your point, Kevin, like smarter. We don't have to work harder, we're working smarter, so what's the better way? And
Yeah.
there's just not that fear where we can have the creativity to try something else.
One of the other things I've been emphasizing as part of that humility conversation with new employees is serving members and interacting with your coworkers without judgment. You know, in dealing with finances, sometimes you see people that are, doing great, and some people that are having struggles, and their struggles are usually temporary, and so you can't enter that conversation laden with judgment and be able to actually help them authentically and make them feel comfortable. And so we talk about, and we're one of the few financial institutions where you can walk in regardless of your credit history or even if you've had negative experience with a checking account before. As long as you can meet the government's ID requirements, we're going to give you a low cost, low barrier access to the financial system. And so you can only do that if you approach it from a place of inclusion and serving people without judgment. And so that's kind of been one of the more recent evolutions that I've been talking to people about, to just be able to put that in them right from the very beginning, is that, the days of the mean old lady at the bank that chastised you because you overdrafted your account, those days are gone. That's not what people are looking for today. They're looking for someone to
Partner.
authentically help them, get to where they want to be.
That's beautiful.
Kevin,
And chills.
if I was an emoji right now, it'd be like the circle face with like the heart eyes, because it really is so much about what you're doing for the employee, but now you're just talking about how you're servicing customers, servant really, that kind of servant leadership model, customer experience model. I mean, it's all just so. Honestly, there does need to be a white paper written on what you're doing over there. This has to be broader, and the main reason for that is continuing the proof of concept. Like, this stuff works.
Yeah.
CEO, your life in front of the board is going to be better if you can just take a deep breath and think about how you can operate your business differently. Like, I want Harvard to start to teach this stuff. Too many
My wife
spreadsheets at Harvard.
We've won so many awards in the last few years, and my wife jokes that I need to turn myself sideways to fit my head through the door. And it's nice to be recognized, but a lot of our motivation is intrinsic, and it's more about doing the work and knowing that the recognition and the results are going to come. We don't ever start with the goal of making a certain amount of money. That's the end outcome for us. But our staff has really gotten they take things very personal now, and we have a whole a survey process and a way that we manage complaints and such, and and we score very high on the net promoter score for that. Even with our members, we score over 85. The cool part is that the staff absolutely owns when they have a member that has some kind of a problem. Our service level is that the manager of that department will contact them, pick up the phone, and call that person within one business day and see if we can solve their problem. And so they take it very personal, and it's competitive kind of in a healthy way of like, we got this feedback, we have to, let's help this person solve this problem, and they see it as a challenge. And it could be the complete opposite. Some people will see it as kind of like the surveillance state. The members can tattle on you. Our staff took it the complete opposite way, as like, challenge accepted, let me figure out how I can solve this person's problem.
That's all the
Hungry and
foundation.
humble.
Yeah, that's all the foundation that you set. This isn't about catcha. This is about, hey, we want to work in this type of environment with these types of behaviors. We want to be humble. We want to be hungry. We want to be smart. We want to treat customers well. We want to treat each other well, whatever all the things are, right? So the reason it didn't turn into that is because of the foundation you laid. Again, I'm like, the case study, I mean, less about promoting you and promoting this concept that this does work. This is something that it's like, this will make your life easier, make your organization function better. But you can't do it in piecemeal, and you can't just take one problem here and be like, oh, our scores. If you would have just said, oh, we're missing this thing on our score, but you hadn't done all that foundational work, that even wouldn't have changed, right? So, I mean, it is.
Or plug a program, right? Let's throw a program at it.
Exactly.
It's not one of these things. It's all of these things.
It's all of these things. And all of these things, I would imagine, Kevin, it's a constant work at them too, right? It's looking at what you've got going on and where do you need to start make changes in your things. It's not like a one-time stamp and done.
Oh no, it's an ongoing process. Funny you talk about like the formula. We have our one of our business partners that helps us run that member acquisition. They ventured into some leadership development work, and so the guy that was heading that, he came out here for another purpose, and we had gotten together and we had sent one of the people to his leadership program just to kind of test it and see if it would be a good fit for the toolbox. And so we had lunch with him, and he was asking all these questions, and we were listing out all these different things that we were doing, to help make the culture stronger. And he says, no, you really ought to you ought to do this as a consulting business. You ought to put all this together, and you should teach other people how to do it. And I kind of laughed. I said, well, Ned, number one, we don't have time to do that. And number two, I'm not sure that you can't replicate it if the people don't care deeply about what they're doing. So maybe you would eventually get them to care if you did this stuff enough. But yeah, when we were talking through it all, it was funny. It was probably like 12 or 14 things. I wouldn't even call them programs. They're just kind of things that, maybe we do a little differently than other folks.
Well, if you ever need help with that consulting arm, Rachel and I can help with the implementation.
But it is important to underscore, right? Because there are so many consultants, there are so many coaches, there are so many programs. There's, everywhere you look, there's another program, another thing, and so you can't just throw one thing at it and expect it to work exactly in that way. Like you said, there's got to be that deep level of commitment and really understanding that this is what it takes to move the needle on the actual business objectives. I think the numbers there. You have to viscerally know that, because again, we're kind of where
we have a term for that when we take a program, if you will, that's off the shelf, and then we take little pieces of it that we like and we tweak it. We call it mid-organizing things.
Yeah, and you have to know enough about it to be able to do that, right? And to be able to know what your culture needs, what your people needs, what your stamp is on that too.
Well, I was going to say, I think the leadership, because a lot of times, we'll get calls and it's like, help us fix this director group. And we're like, okay, well, we need to start at the executive level. It really does require, and really it's that
Yeah,
C-suite.
this is a symptom of what's
Yeah, it's
happening
this
elsewhere.
C-suite
Yeah.
needs
Yes.
to be the ones pushing and
Yeah.
believing
Setting the stage.
and modeling and all the things to make those things happen. So to your point, you could package up a program, but if the executive leaders don't think it applies to everybody but them, you're back in the same place. So again, it's the continued kudos to you and your team, because this stuff, we know this stuff isn't easy. I would say this stuff isn't hard necessarily, but it's not always easy to make the change at first, right? But sounds like the teams are just, now it's just second nature to them. They actually
Yeah.
enjoy it.
There's an interesting history with that. So my predecessor was here for 33 years, and a lot of the other leaders in the organization were, 15, 20 years. And Bill and I had a lot of disagreements and hard conversations about the level of investment that I wanted to make in the employees, because it was very much, and then they started when the credit union was $20 million and 10 employees. And so the organization kind of grew faster than their capacity, but there was still this sort of hierarchical mindset where, things had to go up the chain and then down the chain, and we'll tell you what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And when I got to Mid Oregon in 2016, that was kind of breaking the organization. Like, we couldn't get things done fast enough, and this core group of people that are now our executives had been with the credit union for 8 to 10 years. They've had virtually no career growth, no investment in them. They didn't have any opportunity, really. They didn't see any opportunity, and so it was like a huge immediate culture shift. And it was really funny because the organization that I came from was more people focused, and it's just always been a part of what I do, was to just like coach people up, give them new skills, get them ready for whatever's going to be next. And so I didn't even really ask Bill or anyone else. I just kind of started doing it with a couple of my direct reports. And so we started sending him the things, and all of a sudden the other executives one day, they like, well, wait a minute, why are your people going to all this stuff and getting all these opportunities? And I kind of paused for a minute and I said, well, why aren't yours? And then ultimately it took a little bit of convincing, but Bill had enough trust in me, and we kind of knew the future path of the organization and what was going to be needed. And now it's become such a key part of the culture that you don't get a performance review, you get coaching. You don't, you have your required training, and then you have your electives, and we let people just go learn about another job function, even in their first 6 months, 8 months. If they think they might have an interest in lending, we'll send them to spend a day working with a lending person just to see what it's like, see if it's something they might be interested in. And all of these things that, it really kind of feeds into our hungry value. Like, we want people that want to learn the next thing, and that they want to build a career. And that can look like, if you want to be a teller, we want you to be the best teller you can be.
It doesn't have to be upwardly mobile. Not everybody wants that, and the organization doesn't always need that. So how can people still grow and feel cared for, and that they're learning, like you said before?
Yeah, it's not. It's been more of a process maybe than it looks like to the outside world. It's really been like a 7-year process of getting the organization to think like it does.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that you said that I feel so passionate about is that leaders, regardless of where you sit, that self-awareness piece is key. And you had shared that you send your executive team to an intensive boot camp where a lot of that is the introspective time. How do you want to show up? What are your blinders? And I just think that the key to so much of this, being able to be humble, being able to be hungry, is knowing what you want, knowing who you are, and that level of self-awareness and self-management the foundation there. So,
Yeah.
you know, we spend a lot of time talking about emotional intelligence, so it's
Yeah, we you know, we've done the disc profile with the bird for years, and I think it was probably about 2 years ago that we added the emotional intelligence piece. And yeah, when we talk about hungry, humble, and smart, smart is the emotional intelligence piece. So yeah, it's kind of become integrated into what we do there as well. What kind of fun stuff are you guys working on?
More of the same. Actually, we're working on a retreat.
Yeah.
That's
Cool.
new.
We're
Yeah,
fun.
that's new. So we are looking to launch a retreat in 2025, where folks can come. We're starting with women who are going through menopause or perimenopause, because, you know, that's who we are. So we can start with what we know. Start with what we know. But yeah, so we're doing that in Jamaica and working towards how folks are leading and showing up in the workforce. You know, we also work with leaders at all levels. So of course we've got clients and do facilitation at the executive level, but also, for me, probably more, as you know, Kevin, because I've had the wonderful pleasure of being a cog in the wheel of Mid-Oregon the last 2 years, helping managers, middle managers, directors find their voice and figure out how they want to show up and give feedback and be accountable and vulnerable and authentic and all the things there. So fortunately, I get to do that a bunch in lots of different groups, whether it's with you or groups that other groups that we've got going on. So that's always really fun. I mean, it's been such a joy. I've had, and Andy, we've probably talked about this, but I've, again, fortunately had 2 groups through Mid-Oregon, both just so different experiences, and Kevin's so meticulous about what he wants to cultivate in that group. So not only is it fun and exciting for me, but it also makes my job a lot easier because the culture is already there and he's already set the stage with his leadership team on what he really wants these folks to get out of our time. So, you know, again, there's always room for people to decide what they want. You know, that's all part of the coaching. But it's really clear, and I think that clarity, again, as we started, is huge, and what is in people's roles to make decisions on, what doesn't need to go up the chain, what does, and just for people to feel empowered to do that. So but anyway, I digress a little bit. Everybody's been just amazing. Like, they so care about their job, they care about Mid-Oregon, they care about each other, they care about the members, and almost sometimes to a detriment, right? So that's also some things that we work on, which goes back to the self-awareness. What can you give at this phase in your life?
Yeah.
You know, where do you want to be? Are you good with where you're at, and how are you making the most out of that time, or is there something more that you want to be doing? So
I think the promotion, in terms of promoting Mid-Oregon, is one part, but it really is proof of concept. It's your colleagues needing to realize that this is a benefit to them as well. This will actually make you look good, CEO, right? It's not just, because I understand that there's some of us who are altruistic, like, this is the right thing to do. It's intrinsic, as you mentioned. This is the right thing to do. This is how we should operate. But then there's the other group of people. And so I'm like, fine, if you stroke your ego, great, because I just want great work environments for people.
Yeah.
And this is beneficial for you as well. So I think there's definitely got to be a white paper in there somewhere.
yeah, and we are so mission driven. You know, Be Kind Life is so mission driven on building kinder workplace cultures, and of course that's going to look different with different interventions for every organization. But that is our mission, and that is why we do what we do. And
Yeah, well, our teams have really enjoyed working with you, Rachel. I think you were really transformative for that seller supervisor group, kind of getting them to find their voice, but also for them to function as a team and that level of the organization, kind of like our branch managers do, where they have a built-in support network.
you got a great team, and it's obvious why. So thank you so much for sharing with us, and we'll continue the conversation. We'd love to have you back at some point, but it sounds like we've got a project on a white paper together. So thank you.
Well, I do appreciate it, and appreciate the kind words about Mid Oregon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time today. It was a pleasure meeting you as well.
Nice to meet you too, Andy. Take care.
Have a
All
great
right,
rest of
until
your
next
day.
time. Bye.